Let's look forward to the NFL draft with Travis Maye. Today, we're talking quarterbacks and running backs. We're going to have Travis on twice this week. We're going to look at all the different skill positions, and very excited as it's kind of become an annual tradition here on RotoViz Overtime. We get Travis Maye on before the NFL draft to talk through all things prospect. So, Travis, excited to have you back on the show. Obviously, some changes in your work life at the moment with heading on over to A to Z Sports, college football managing editor over there. And of course, you can still find him on the RotoViz airwaves with Stefan Leco over at the College Accounting podcast. But Travis, how are you doing as we set pretty much now 4 weeks away from the NFL draft?
Yeah, that's wild. Like this week will be 4 weeks out, and it's kind of crazy. It's sneaking up on me. And it's Senior Bowl. My first week with A to Z Sports was working at the Senior Bowl with a bunch of people down there, drinking through a fire hose, getting to know a new team, and meeting with all these players and coaches and whatever. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, you're at the combine. It's like wow. So many moving parts, so many trips, and then you're trying to build out the college team. So we've already made two hires for that. So just a lot going on. But it's a really fun time of year as we're heading towards the NFL draft. And as always, I've been looking at a bunch of these players for 3, 4, 5 years, and so well-rehearsed takes on many of them so far. So glad to hop in and share some and talk through all the top players.
Well, Travis, it's so exciting to have you on the show with the background that you have in college football, with obviously your track record and with the experience that we got to have working with you personally. And so we're just going to grill you here for hours and see how it goes. We're going to start at the quarterback position. And I always refer to you as, one of like the gurus of quarterback evaluation within the industry. You did some fantastic prospect work and really some groundbreaking work at RotoViz there. And I know you continue to build on all of those things. And right now, the big name, not necessarily in the news, but the trendy prospect, the guy who seems to be rising and rising and rising, and now appears to be maybe the 4th top 5 QB, and maybe won't even be the 4th of that group, is JJ McCarthy. You look into his numbers, and he was very effective when required to make a play for the Michigan Wolverines, but mostly they hid him with defense and a good running game. What should we make of this mix of attributes for him when he wasn't really the driver of the offense like some other prospects? But I mean, he was a winner. And again, when he was called on, he made the plays.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, right? Because like through the regular season last year, I like to, in terms of like quarterback analysis, because a lot of the players, they don't have the same full length of a season. If you're playing in the playoff, you got like 15 games on your resume. So I really like to look at like the first 12 games, maybe 13 of a player season. So like through the regular season and like championship weekend, JJ McCarthy had like 150 fewer pass attempts than Michael Penix Jr. So comparing the two profiles is a little strange because the volume is just so different. Like the reliance on their two arms was just not even like the same game at times. Like the one game where he threw the ball, McCarthy threw the ball 8 times and didn't complete a pass. The only attempt that he had in the second half of the game got called back because the defensive back tackled AJ Barner. So it was an interference call. So it's just really funny to kind of compare two vastly different profiles instead of in terms of volume. But with McCarthy, what you see is somebody, even on small volume, even on, in situations where he's not in a rhythm, not called on to make, 17 passes in 2 different drives, he's still making the right decisions. And so even on you might think it's him getting hidden by their scheme. It might be him getting hidden by, the run game at Michigan, and trying to move around him because he's not good enough to make all the plays. It's just Michigan designed their offense. They designed their entire offense and defense to just win in the trenches and dominate in the trenches. So they wanted to just manhandle opponents, and they realized that was the best way to handle their most specifically meaningful opponent in Ohio State. And so they built it that way. And then I think if we penalize McCarthy for not being a high volume passer, we're going to miss out on somebody who has one of the better profiles just on a play-by-play basis that we've seen in recent years. McCarthy, like, he was top 5 or 6 in this class for, like, by most every single measure in terms of like his per play numbers. Like the volume numbers, not so much, but like EPA per play, his QBR, his pass efficiency, like adjusted yards per pass attempt, a lot of meaningful metrics. He's way at top, if not like a top, especially if you do age adjustments for your production. So I know that we like to see better volume stats, but the key rate stats that mean the most to me and that mean the most to predict draft capital are there. So I'm not surprised he's top 4, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being like the second best quarterback in the class.
That's the part that's going to be interesting, because we do have, drafts where it does feel like it's going to be quite heavy at the quarterback position, sometimes maybe the wide receiver position. Then when the draft comes, somebody, slips down the board a couple of rounds. A couple of picks, or even into the teens. It's going to be interesting to see, and I'm interested to get your opinion if that could happen this year. But the guy who is currently expected to be top of that list is Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Pretty much a almost pristine prospect, and expected, as I mentioned, to go number 1 overall. Then that would lead to him being the 101 and Superflex dynasty drafts and those sorts of formats. How does he compare for you historically to some of the best prospects, and what are maybe some of the red flags that we should be aware of as he comes into the NFL?
Historically, he's one of the best we've seen, because, he's got 3 seasons above the 90th percentile in terms of scheme-adjusted pass efficiency, which is a metric I actually built when I was with RotoViz. And so he, in terms of like just isolating for the passing game without even, adding in the fact that he just killed it on the ground and added a bunch of rushing value in terms of rushing touchdowns, especially, like he has one of the most consistent profiles, 3 years of really ridiculous production. The only other quarterback in recent memory to do that was Trevor Lawrence, and he's really the only one still alive in the 2021 quarterback class at this point. And so like it just as a passer, it's really impressive, because you just see just immense consistency, putting up elite marks both in volume and just per play numbers. He had a little bit of a short stint last year where he kind of struggled 3 or 4 games in a row where he wasn't perfect. And people want to pick apart that because, oh, wait, he's human? Weird. And so when your down season is 30 touchdowns to 5 interceptions and, still by most every measure being a top 5 player in the sport, I think you're doing okay. So to me, while he had a couple down moments because just the team around him was kind of falling apart and USC was a complete mess last year, given their standards, I think that I'm still very high on him, and he should definitely be the first overall player. If we're going to pick him apart a little bit, he does hold on the ball too long at times. His time to throw is kind of silly. Time to throw is not really predictive stat in and of itself, but it can show stylistic tendencies. And he does try to go for the home run, even when he should probably just take, an 8 to 10 yard game. Again, a little bit more so than he does. And so that gets him into trouble and not making the right pre-snap read because he thinks he can be Superman, and he can. But when he fails to do so, that kind of gets him in trouble. So I think it's just overreaching at times, looking for that home run when it's not necessarily going to be there. But if I'm going to trust any quarterback to do that, just to overextend and to stretch, looking for the home run play, knowing that he can make that play, it's going to be Caleb Williams, and he is one of the best prospects really ever.
Travis, when we're looking at a player who had a monster season, and looking at someone who could be this ultimate fantasy weapon, obviously Jayden Daniels comes to mind there. And not only that, he's expected to go very early in the NFL draft. And that part of it might be a little surprising to some people. So you have a guy who goes from top recruit to bust to superstar. Obviously, you have the Herm Edwards effect. You get to a real college program. He's surrounded there by receivers that might even compare to the receivers that a guy like Joe Burrow was surrounded with in college. You get these ridiculous final year passing numbers. You've got the wild rushing stats, including evasion rates that are off the charts. But we also have a guy who's been in college for a long time, is going to enter the NFL at an older age. And in addition to kind of the receivers he got to play with, I would imagine that there is some concern that his frame would be, I don't know, problematic, but is another element when we're talking about risk reward where it could be problematic both from a passing and from a running perspective. I mean, is this guy, I mean, it seems like he's probably the ultimate risk reward player for fantasy, because if he hits, I mean, you could even see him, trouncing a player like Caleb Williams. The bust risk would seem to be pretty high. You bring a lot more kind of background in watching him play through the years, and you can also discuss what it means for a guy to struggle. Although even some of the struggles I think maybe are a little bit overstated, but somebody who got to play for a long time in college to put up this huge final season, how much should we be adjusting for those circumstances?
I don't think people look at the entirety of his career fairly, because a lot of people that are analyzing him right now haven't been watching him since 2019 when he was actually connecting with Brandon Ayuk on a couple deep balls as a true freshman. It's funny to think that he actually played with Brandon Ayuk, given how long he's been in the league at this point. But that whole program at Arizona State imploded with his 2019 was his first year, I guess, and 2020 was the year that they had the recruiting violations for doing some stuff during COVID they shouldn't have. Coaches got in trouble, players started leaving, transferring out. It was an absolute mess prior to him landing with LSU. And so it would have been amazing to see what his trajectory would have looked like had he been a part of a normal program in the most important breakout seasons of his career. Because as a true freshman, he was already putting up like in between 60th and 70th percentile key indicators and stats that you'd like to see an NFL player do in terms of a quarterback projection for first round picks. And so it really looked like he was on track to be a first round player, even as a true freshman. The kind of like charts and whatever we want to build in terms of like the arcs that you should follow of production aren't as linear necessarily at quarterback as they are like wide receiver or even like tight end. But for quarterbacks, he was definitely way ahead of the game. And so you have this valley where we think he's a bust and he's done and he's not going to hit. But when he's given an opportunity to take over at LSU, he earns the starting job when they already have LSU, that is, a good quarterback in waiting, Garrett Nussmeier, to be the go-to guy. But still, he comes in and he's like, no, I'm better. I'm ready to go. I bring immense value as a passer and with my legs. And so he comes on and really syncs up with Blake Neighbors, some in 2022, but misses on some deep shots. He's clearly just figuring out the scheme, but all the tools are there. He's already kind of a mid-round projection coming into the year, maybe like a fourth round pick because of the mobility and upside. But then he puts up like the most pass efficient year we've ever seen, like 100th percentile metrics, like in adjusted yards per attempt, his passer rating, whatever scheme adjustments you want to make. It was just wildly efficient, seriously on par or better than in terms of like per attempts than that Joe Burrow year you referenced. So I am concerned about the frame a little bit, but in totality, his journey, it just screams like, hey, had things gone differently in the first, that middle section, he probably would have been in the league as a first round pick 2-3 years ago because he has all the tools. He's got the speed, he's got the elusiveness, and now the deep ball accuracy. That's crazy, scary good. So I maybe he takes a couple too many sacks. I don't care. I'm still all in with what he could do to break fantasy football.
Here's a question that's going to lead to looking for a headline at the end of it. So we got Drake Maye. He obviously sat behind Sam Howell at North Carolina, broke out in his sophomore season, took a little bit of a step back as a junior. The passing numbers aren't as impressive as the rest of the class, but he's young, big, lots of rushing upside. Here's the headline question. Is he the next Josh Allen?
In a good way? I think so. I mean, like, because Josh Allen, I mean, like he's very big like that. Josh Allen's peak profile is still not good. Like he was in the 60th percentile, whatever range in his final year, which is not great. It was like the
optimism for Josh Allen as a fantasy contributor wasn't that high.
It was not. It was not. And I mean, like when there was just no way to squint at his profile and be like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna hit for sure. Because and he had a weird journey. He played at JUCO, went to Wyoming where they had like me playing wide receiver, and so it's really hard to gauge like what is this guy? He can chuck it over them their mountains, but like, what do we do with this monstrous athlete? And I think that Drake Maye is much more established, much more proven as a passer than Josh Allen was, but he has athleticism that is not sneaky. Like, he is just flat out athletic to make a play with his legs. Now, he takes too many sacks, trying to create a little bit too much at times.
Did he learn that from Sam Howell? No.
Yeah. He learned. He got a up close and personal look at Sam Howell taking way too many sacks too. So maybe, hopefully, he learns and avoids that in the future. But man, he's got the crazy arm talent. Like, he'll make that crazy play. You're like, oh my gosh, how did you just make that throw? And then that shows up in the per rate stats, like, because like he put up one of the best seasons we've ever seen in 2022. Last year he struggled because he lost all his best weapons, and his best weapon that he was supposed to have, he missed out on the first few games of the year because the NCAA is ridiculous. Like, Devontae Walker missed some time to kick off the year. So I think Drake Maye could very well be the next Josh Allen, but I think he might be a better mix between Josh Allen and Justin Herbert together, because he's got an analytics profile that would be closer to Herbert, but maybe a skill set that is closer to Allen. So I like that as a mix of upside blend there between Josh Allen and Justin Herbert for a Drake Maye.
With Daniels and Maye, you have some similarities and you've got some extreme differences. Which player do you think is riskier?
I think, man, that's funny. I think Daniels is riskier. Like, his probability distribution, his right tail, like I said, breaks fantasy football. Like, he's like the next Lamar Jackson, but maybe plus. like that's the right tail. But then because of his issues in terms of sack avoidance, and really a metric I'm getting into is like pressure creation for quarterbacks. Like, he kind of brings some stuff on himself at times. And so I do worry about that in particular at his stature. That makes him a little bit more risky. And the fact that he did have just kind of like one huge, crazy breakout year that checked the boxes at a later state in his career, I do have more questions than Drake Maye, where, in his second season at all, removed from high school, he was putting up, 95th percentile plus numbers as a passer, which is just incredible. So more risky, Jayden Daniels, but higher upside also Jayden Daniels.
So we got these, potentially 3 stars, and then I'm going to still, I just can't help it. JJ McCarthy is going to be a game manager until he puts up some numbers, and it sounds like people think he will, which is awesome. I'm rooting for him. So we have the 3 stars, we have the game manager, and then we have some interesting guys, because more than 4 teams need a rookie starter. Nix and Michael Penix get pushed well down the board in most cases. In terms of tracking the mocks in the last week, it seems like Penix has kind of jumped back over Nix, which in some ways is interesting because Nix appears to be just better, right? But when you look at him and you look at some of his numbers compared to Jayden Daniels, he's the other guy who has those similarities, but didn't have that early performance that we talked about from Jayden Daniels. You could definitely correct me if I'm wrong on this. You would know a lot more, but Nix did not succeed in any way, shape, or form at his first stop, and then has to go to Oregon, where he's fantastic. And even once you remove all of those short passes, he's fantastic. But these guys are old. Can we look at them in any way, shape, or form as being similar, or if not similar, because those top 3 guys have these amazing upside scenarios? Where should we be looking at Nix and Penix? Are these guys who can come in and play? And you're thinking about teams like, the Vikings may be in the mix for McCarthy. Again, you'd like to have the pass volume if that's the case. But, a team like the Denver Broncos, who has, Sean Payton and, arguably some interesting weapons. From a fantasy perspective, you want those teams not to be short-circuited. Can either of these guys come in and run an NFL offense in year 1?
I think given their immense experience in both cases, I think the answer is yes. I'm not sure that what that upside looks like in both cases. I think the game manager profile actually it might be a better fit for like what Bo Nix is rather than JJ McCarthy, because Bo Nix, what he kind of learned to do and what he did not do early in his career is take what the offense was designed to give him. At Auburn, and Gus Malzahn's offense is kind of a putt weird horizontal nonsense offense with some deep shots thrown in, and I hated it as an Auburn fan. But Bo Nix just found himself getting in trouble, scrambling too early, kind of like trying to create something out of nothing rather than just taking what was designed for him to take. And it's Oregon, he kind of adjusted and realized, look, if I'm going to succeed in this new spot, we have the weapons. I just need to distribute. I need to find them. I need to find Troy Franklin on that 6-yard slant and let him take it to the house. I don't need to scramble around and make my own game. And so you saw that him getting rid of the ball way faster, living within the scheme that Auburn designed him to succeed in, and he was just really freaking good doing that. His ADOT was like outside the top 100 because he was just taking really easy chip shots and putts underneath and letting Troy Franklin just burn defenders, and Tez Johnson just burn defenders. And that was great. But what's weird with him, though, is just it's hard to analyze him objectively because of how good his offensive line was. Most offensive lines are close enough in college. They're like, okay, that probably didn't set up him to succeed at any greater level than others. Oregon's was just nothing but like aliens, like Jackson Powers Johnson at center, Johnny Cornelius on one side, like Connerly on the other. Like they were stacked across the offensive line. And so all of their offensive line metrics were like 99th percentile. So he was half of last year. He had a pressure rate below 10%. Like average, like on average, quarterbacks in college football get pressured 30% of the time, just over 30% of the time. And he was like less than 10%. It was insane, like how little pressure he was giving. Part of that, though, is he was living within the scheme that he was asked to succeed in. And so given his 61 career starts at this point, and his ability to succeed within the framework of which he's asked to succeed, I think he could be fine. The upside I'm concerned with. I don't think it's there like the other players in this class, but I think we might be surprised, and he might just be like the next kind of Derek Carr-ish, quarterback that brings just enough mobility, because I think he's got that underrated aspect, but I think he can succeed. Michael Penix, he just needs to stay healthy because and avoid sacks like he did last year, because his pressure to sack rate was like 8% or something crazy last year. So his pocket manipulation and ability to find the right receiving option of 3 really good ones last year leads me to believe that he could also manage the game and be accurate enough on a deep shot to, keep the defenses honest. But I think they both project more as early second-round picks, even still, given the mock draft noise this week.
Those are the quarterbacks, obviously, that are going in that early top end of the first round into the second round, as you mentioned there. Is there anyone outside of that we should be paying attention to at the quarterback position that can realistically have an impact at the NFL level?
Spencer Rattler is the other name. You've probably heard his name quite a lot for several years now. He was supposed to be a first-round pick, like after what he did. I guess it was back in 2020. Now at this point, we thought that he could be the real deal. And a lot of it was schematically, opened up for him because the Lincoln Riley system is awesome. But he still can really spin it. He can really throw it. And so I do think what he did for South Carolina was good enough to be like a fringe day 2 projection. However, I think he in the end, his profile screams like, hey, early day 3 target. And that's it. Because I think we're going to see year over year, you see like 5 to 7 quarterbacks in rounds 1 through 3. We're probably going to see 6 this year. And so, the targets that you might throw a dart at that might get a start here and there are going to be Rattler. It's going to be Jordan Travis. Somebody's going to look at Joe Milton's build and think he's it, and he's not. But Rattler or Jordan Travis, because what Jordan Travis did even before this last year was really impressive. 2 years ago, even, he had like an 85th percentile scheme-adjusted pass efficiency season plus mobility. So the guys I'm looking to take a shot on late in rookie drafts that might be afterthoughts are Spencer Rattler and especially Jordan Travis, because he's probably going to be even cheaper given the injury.
That's pretty cool to hear. Travis, somebody that I tried to sort of subtly push in our first couple of editions of the rookie guide. So now wrap us back around to the beginning here, Travis. And we started with JJ McCarthy. He's the one that you wanted to talk about and people want to hear about. Where are you drafting him? And are we going to get 4 guys in the top 5?
We never even
gotten these guys are going to come off.
Yeah. We've never even gotten like 4 inside the top 9.
And that's what I meant. That's what I was kind of hinting at when we started off. Is sometimes we get hyped that's going to happen, and as the draft happens, somebody always slips down. Or
yeah. I think that we're probably gonna see one of them slide a little bit, but I think we do see 4 inside the top 10. I don't know where it actually happens price wise, but the Vikings have been figuring their situation out to kind of trade up if they have to. The reason buzz even this week is that the Giants are actually really interested in JJ McCarthy. Betting markets have JJ McCarthy slotting in somewhere between pick 4, 5, and 6. In fact, I wrote this up this week. They over 2/3 of the odds on like FanDuel, DraftKings are implied to live within picks 4 and 6 for JJ McCarthy, which is just absolutely wildly aggressive, given like the other players that are going to be available. And so I think the quarterbacks goes Caleb Williams. And then after that, I think it's going to be Jayden Daniels. I think he fits perfectly. Really, Daniels and Maye would be fine and with the Commanders, but Kingsbury there, he's worked with Kyler Murray. Jayden Daniels would be a great fit, in my opinion, with the Commanders. Then we see Drake Maye go to the Patriots. And then after that, like the Cardinals are just, there's no way they don't take Marvin Harrison Jr. Like there's no way they're like, oh yeah, we don't want that, potentially generational player. And then at 5, Harbaugh is just weird. I'm sorry, Jim Harbaugh is just a really weird dude. Like, so I'm sorry, like if we want to try to predict what he's going to do, we just can't, because he might just go tight end. He might go offensive line. He might trade the pick to somebody, not the Vikings. We have no idea, but he's probably going to go and be the wild card. But I don't even see a trade up really happening at this point, given the price that it would take to happen. So I think it goes, we probably get to 7, 8, whatever, before we see the Vikings even trade up into this spot. I don't think it's going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's a fun thing to get clicks for months, but it's never happened for a reason, and I don't think it happens now.
So, I mean, I wasn't going to go this direction, but since you put it out there and have led into this, I mean, if Harbaugh is that weird, I mean, are we going to get a trade of Justin Herbert to the Vikings with the Chargers then taking JJ McCarthy? I mean, does JJ McCarthy's own coach think that he's good enough to start and win at the NFL level? I mean, that seems like a key question to me.
He was, and he's just rooting for his guys, right? He was like talking about a couple months ago that JJ McCarthy should be the first pick off the board.
Right.
Like he should be like the first overall player. And so if that's his real opinion, then by all means, Chargers, trade away Justin Herbert and select JJ McCarthy. Like that's not what I would recommend, but he is weird enough to do something like that. I don't think in all reality that's what happens, because he doesn't want that to be his first move. I think at the Chargers, but that would be really fun.
Well, as a Kansas City Chiefs fan and as a Justin Jefferson fan, I would like to see Herbert on the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm not pissed off with the Kansas City Chiefs. It will be funny and fascinating to see how that runs throughout the draft, but it is a case, like you mentioned, all the quirks of some of these front offices, but will people pay the price to get up, and will people be willing to see if a player slides? And it can't just be all quarterbacks. There is going to be wide receivers, tight ends, and so on going off the board as well. So it is going to be fascinating, but I always feel like when we get to this point that a couple of guys will slide, even into the teens, as well. Yeah. So we'll move on to the running back position, and we're going to start off with Jonathon Brooks. Question for you is, how good exactly is Jonathon Brooks? If it wasn't for his injury, would he be the RB1 as a clear-cut option in this class? Would people be looking at him in a different light? And then the other part of it is, if that isn't the case, is he a player who, even if he was 100% healthy coming in, would he still be below what we look at as kind of the elite prospect here? Where do you have him kind of lined up?
I think there's a great chance he would be the running back 1, because what we would have seen had he stayed healthy all the way through 15 games with Texas is that he would have like 2,000 plus yards from scrimmage in his final year. Like, he was already on pace for that mark. If he had just stayed healthy, Texas could have actually probably made it to the national championship game had he been there. And if that had happened, then like game over. Like, we would have been talking about him as like a late first projection in like the Travis Etienne kind of range, whatever it was, like pick 22 or something like that. But he wouldn't have been, like, oh my gosh, this guy's Bijan. Oh my gosh, this guy's Zeke. This guy's Saquon Barkley. He wouldn't have been that kind of prospect. He had a shorter resume, but I mean, he was stuck behind Bijan Robinson for 2 years. But when he was on the field, he averaged over 7 yards per touch, even in a backup role, prior to getting more of an opportunity last fall. So he flashed even before we saw the upside and potential that was always there, evidently, based on last year's season. But yeah, given the injury, he said he should be ready by camp, but we typically do see, 15-20% drop off versus career rate, oftentimes, if not even more, for guys coming off of like an ACL injury in that first year after. So he might start a little bit slower as a rookie, but he could still, even if he is slower, outproduce any other running back in the class. He's not my running back one, but he is very, very close.
Is he going to catch enough passes at the NFL level to be that hybrid, big time fantasy threat?
I think that he can. I think that Texas didn't always ask him to catch a lot of balls, and oftentimes you can see that happening because, hey, they have 3 legitimate NFL talents at other spots in the offense. Like, there's a good chance that Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Jatavian Sanders all come off the board inside the top 50, 60 picks. And so when you have those kind of options, you're not always looking to dink and dunk underneath to your running back, because you've got the fastest player to ever run the 40 at the combine, scored a touchdown in 5 different college football playoff games, an absolute monster in the red zone. And then you got Jatavian Sanders, who frankly could have played edge rusher, tight end, wide receiver, offensive line. People didn't know where he was going to even go when he came into college, because he was just, hey, look, he's a 5-star or whatever. Like, just get him in our program. So coming in like that, and that's, of course, Jatavian Sanders. So I think he can. He just wasn't asked to be a high volume kind of guy.
So, Travis, when we're looking at the rest of this class, it's just, I get pretty excited about it, because there are some players who are pretty interesting. And yet, for someone who hasn't spent the last 4 years, watching every college football game, it's hard to understand why some of these guys didn't play more. And that's going to kind of be the theme as we go through the top players. Trey Benson, right? He runs a 4.39 40 at 216 pounds. That gives him a 95th percentile speed score. He posted a 31% evasion rate in 2022, according to the Sports Info Solution numbers. That obviously is a star level. You have those two things combined, and then you look at his overall resume, and you're like, this dude didn't actually do a ton. Why is that?
Well, I mean, he kind of tore everything up in his leg, when he was still at Oregon, when he came up in the first place. And I actually talked to him about that at the combine, because he went through a really tough time, because he realized, man, I missed all this time. Oregon's a really competitive backfield. I might not get this opportunity, even if I stay, given how they want to use the running backs. And so he kind of saw an opportunity to join Florida State, Mike Norvell, and the offense, and what he'd done with the offense there, and succeeding with running backs, using them in fun, versatile ways. He liked that opportunity, so he went, saw it, and as soon as he was healthy and up to speed, he was the best option. He wasn't necessarily the feature back that we like to see for fantasy football projection, but if you look back to Mike Norvell's running back usage, even to when he was at Memphis, like even the guys that got early capital there, like they were not feature back guys with high volume of touches. Like Tony Pollard was like a gadget guy, and Antonio Gibson was like he caught passes more than even had carries. Darrell Henderson, he had that 1 year where he was a feature, like crazy numbers on the ground, but there were also other guys who had crazy rushing totals as well. So how he uses Norvell, that is, and his offenses, how he uses running backs, he just doesn't ask one guy to carry, 60, 70% of the workload. Now, I will say, Benson did have like the biggest chunk of workload that we've seen Norvell give a running back in like the last 4 or 5 years. I think it is just this past year. when Trey Benson was at full feature back weight. He was 100% back healthy. He was not held up at all by any injury concerns. And so, I was really impressed by the last 2 seasons of Trey Benson. And really his yards after contact numbers were even more impressive in 2022 than they were in 2023, mainly because he couldn't actually, he kind of talked me through this, but it was like, hey, I couldn't get away from players like I could last year. Now I just run. Like he was like, some of my teammates call me Forrest Gump because I just run. Like, and so like he just gets to the edge and he's got that speed. He's got that 4.39 speed, legit, to burn everybody. And so he doesn't even get touched by him. So I still am very high on Trey Benson and his potential given his athletic profile, his style. And he's just a hilarious person. I will say, I asked him, somebody else asked him about like some fantasy football question, and it was disappointing to realize he doesn't play. But besides that, I like him a lot.
Maybe at the combine, we seen some just when you're talking about there was some interesting questions and footage on Twitter going around. So sometimes maybe fantasy football guys asking the questions about workout as well in those situations. MarShawn Lloyd, he comes in almost as the kind of light version of Benson with above average athleticism, numbers per carry looking pretty good, but not getting the volume. Could he come in and be a bell cow back in the NFL? And what are some of the reasons maybe that he wasn't getting that volume in college?
Well, he too struggled with injury as well. I mean, right out of the gate, we thought that he could be a feature back at the other USC when he was with South Carolina, but he missed a bunch of time. And South Carolina, their running back distribution and touches were weird. I think he was very frustrated by that. He's been coached up. He was never going to talk anybody down, even when people tried to get something negative out of him from his experience at South Carolina at the Combine and at the Senior Bowl. People trying to fish for some kind of headline, whatever reason he transferred to the other USC because that one's better or whatever. Just poorly veiled questions, looking for something, fishing. But he clearly wanted a better opportunity, so he goes to USC. And right out of the gate, he produces crazy numbers, like 8.2 yards per touch last year, like the most efficient running back per touch in the Power 5, like all the Power 4, all the power conferences out there. He was like the most effective, efficient running back. And when actually I asked him about like, how are you so efficient? And he actually talked to me like through some of the coaching that went into that, and to just kind of like reading the next defender beyond where you are, and kind of setting your feet and your lower body up to get where you're going to be 2 or 3 steps ahead. And it was kind of cool. It was very short on the actual like podium time, but I asked him a little bit after, and he got a little bit more into the details. And he's just a very detail oriented, really intelligent running back that I think understands the intricacies of playing the game more so than I've most any of the other running backs. Whereas, Trey Benson was like, I just run. Like, no, MarShawn was like breaking it down. Like, he's like, this is why I win. And so I think that was cool to see. And profile wise, the peak was really promising. And the way that he tested at the Combine was really promising as well. So he's got a feature back build, efficiency, process behind it all. I think he very well could be a steal this year.
So, Travis, we have one more of these guys who, again, wasn't a big-time college player necessarily, but seems like he could be an NFL star, and that obviously is Jaylen Wright. You have the 4.38 40, the 98th percentile explosion score. It takes him to year 3 to really break out, but the per play numbers, again, are pretty extraordinary. The name that comes to mind, obviously, is Alvin Kamara. It is kind of funny when you think about these guys who are athletic like this. The basically top athletic comp in our Workout Explorer is Jerick McKinnon, which, I mean, before all of those injuries, I mean, we were excited about Jerick McKinnon coming to the NFL because his testing was off the charts.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we going to see here from Jaylen Wright?
It's really tough to see because, like, when he gets to that second level, it's clear his speed is real. Like the opening lines for his 40 time were like at 4.32 because the expectations were just through the roof. Like, where you can bet on such things, like the expectations were crazy. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make some easy money because he's not running a 4.32. But I understood like he should probably be around 4.4 legit. And so when he did crack 4.38 or whatever it was, like, wow, like incredible. But like we kind of knew that was coming because he's just so explosive. But Tennessee's scheme, it gets talked about as this really odd wide receiver boosting scheme because of the where they line up the splits, like on the sideline, lots of space in the slot, free releases in the slot, off motion, really creative scheme. But what it does really well in terms of the wide receiver splits is it creates odd spacing problems for the run game. And that's where running backs, if they're good, if they have that second gear, third gear, fourth gear, or 78th gear in Wright's case, they can really crank through and add some yards after contact because they're running 90 miles an hour when they hit the first defender, or they just have a gaping hole because the defense only had 4 or 5 defenders in the box to begin with. I remember a few different plays in the Alabama game, specifically last year, where they had like Chris Braswell on one edge, Dallas Turner on the other, defensive tackle in the middle, and one linebacker. And like if you're looking at like the all 22, like you'd only see 4 defenders like within a few yards of the box. It was just the goofiest looking defense. And so like when teams are playing that oddly against a running back, it's really hard to gauge how does this really translate to the next level. And so I just have questions with him because if he's in a more prototypical pro scheme, how does this work? How does he read when things aren't, large enough to drive a car through, or, the wide receiver splits don't open up and give him like a really simple one defender read in space. So I just have practical schematic questions with him, but the burst numbers, explosive play rate numbers, like they're on par with like Trey Benson's best numbers. And so he's right there. I just have more questions with him. So he's going to be a top 3-4 running back, something like that off the board, maybe 5 at worst. But I just have more questions because he's going to have to completely learn a whole other language because he hasn't been functioning in football reality within Tennessee's offense.
Travis, when we're looking at some of these guys with the injuries, you mentioned things for Benson and Lloyd earlier in their careers. Obviously, Blake Corum has the injury at the end of the 2022 season, which is, I assume, one of the reasons that he comes back. And then in that final season, the overall numbers look fine, but there is this evasion rate collapse that is extreme. Are you concerned about where he is coming off that injury or where he is now? Or, one of the things that was kind of cool from the combine, he runs the agility drills. He puts up a really, really good time. We know that can at times give us a little bit of sense of a player being someone who could emerge as a receiver at the NFL, or that it might help with that part of the profile. And again, somebody who maybe would be asked to do more or different things at the NFL level. How do you see him right now?
Okay. I'm just not as high on Blake Corum, to be honest, as many people have been. Like there was real Heisman buzz for him in 2022, which was just insanity. Because like he ran a bunch of touchdowns in, which is great, but he was not the best running back in 2022 for college football. He wasn't anywhere near last year. He just had a bunch of touchdowns because Michigan's offense was designed to, run over everyone like they're a tank. And so he wasn't really, to me, the most impressive back, even at his peak. He had some decent, like you said, illusion numbers, evasiveness numbers in 2022, but I just have some real questions because he doesn't have elite speed. He does have elite agility, but he doesn't have elite usage in terms of being a receiver, which is what he should project to be at the next level given his size. He's like 5'7", really, really small running back with like record short arms, like under 29-inch arms, which is just wild to me. So really tiny, compact guy. So I don't really know what we're projecting in terms of like, hey, this guy should be a round 2 back in the NFL, or even let alone at this point round 3. Like I have to squint to find anything that looks like, hey, that's a really solid, trustworthy fantasy football contributor, let alone like mid to early round running back prospect. There just aren't many of those in this class. And to me, he's on the fringe of even being around 3 kind of prospect. So I am going to be probably lower than everybody else. And this past season's concerns with the lack of elusiveness can somewhat be attributed to the injury and coming off of that. But he's just, he was at the right place at the right time to have a lot of production.
We had a few other guys who had, disappointing their poor combines. Bucky Irving being one of them, Audric Esteem being another one of the names. And then I generally don't mind when people don't work out at the combine, but there's certain times where maybe that isn't also in the player's favor in terms of what they may be able to show. Braelon Allen didn't work out at the combine. Any thoughts on those three guys?
Yeah, so Braelon Allen, I would have loved to see him work out because I think he would have had okay speed. I think that probably what happened is that his agent was like, look, you're running the 4.5s, and that's fantastic. But if you don't have a good day and you want a 4.6, that could hurt your stock. So he just didn't, he didn't choose to participate.
He didn't think he was going to get into the 4.4s, no.
No, that's just, that wasn't going to be him. And, guys at his size, like I was talking to him a little bit at the combine, and he was just like, yeah, I'm probably going to, I probably play around 233. That's what I like to do. I can carry more weight and be stronger and, have more power. But at the next level, he's probably going to be, playing in the 230s kind of range. So he's been messing with his weight specifically to get that right ahead of the combine. He's been working with some footwork specialists and stuff out in California and somebody to improve on his receiving game specifically so he can be an every down back. Because last year he caught more passes, but he wasn't super efficient with it because he just wasn't comfortable in space. He didn't have the greatest footwork before or even after the catch. So he's been working on some very specific things. Not working on specifically just, hey, how do I shave 2 or 3 tenths off my 40 so I make people squeal in February or March, so I think he's prioritizing the right thing. So I'm not as concerned.
We see a lot of these like big backs from the, the football powerhouses. Not that that's necessarily weird, but I mean, any Alabama guy can put up 700 yards, go run a 4.6 and still get drafted in the 3rd round. And then some of those guys are decent. I mean, not all of them, but some of them. I mean, was there really that much risk if he ran? I mean, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding he's also didn't work out at the pro day.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that kind of raise the concern that you run like a 4.7?
I guess some might. I don't know if you remember, I guess Josh Jacobs was really weird about his participation in his particular season. I guess that was 2019 now. I was really frustrated at how he didn't do anything either. He weighed in super thick, but then didn't work out. But then we really didn't necessarily have questions about his straight line speed necessarily throughout that process. We had questions about his production profile. I remember collectively, except for Kyle, who was really high on him back in the day. But I'm not as concerned. I think I've seen that Braelon Allen can break away from players at the second level. And so he's not Jonathan Taylor, coming out of Wisconsin, but he's like 20 years old and still growing physically. He's going to be 20 years old for basically his entire rookie year. So he's still getting better physically and developing key aspects of his game. So I still rank him very highly despite the lack of testing.
Travis, kind of wrap it up for us here on the running backs.
Sure.
Is there, and we had some guys who, I don't know if came out of nowhere is the right way to put it, but some interesting players who performed really well at the combine and probably put themselves back on the radar. Obviously, there are some small school sleepers. Is there anybody else that you need to mention here before we finish? And then you said that Brooks isn't your number one. Give us your number one guy.
My number one guy, first off, is Trey Benson. He's just his running style, the explosive metrics, the yards after whatever metrics. He's really impressive, especially in 2022, 2023. He got fully healthy and showed he could garner more workload. I think he's going to be the best back out of this class. But as of other guys, you need to know. You probably need to familiarize yourself with Isaac Guerrero out of Louisville, who tested the best out of any running back at the NFL Combine. He's probably going to be at worst kind of a depth play in the right spot because of his absurd straight line and just everything athleticism. His agility scores weren't as elite, but his burst was crazy too. Kamani Vidal out of Troy, I'm keeping my eye on because he was immensely productive when he was asked to carry the load there. And it's not a program that had elite talents all around him, but he chose to stick it out and stay, and rather than transfer, and just killed it last year, being one of the most productive runners in the entire country. And then he tested really well at the combine, compares himself to MJD. So I love to see him work out in the right spot. Tyrone Tracy from my alma mater, Purdue. I have to throw the Boilermaker in there, right? He was a wide receiver for most of all of his recruiting journeys. Like, people talk to him about, hey, you're probably going to be a running back at the next level. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm a wide receiver. Stays a wide receiver at Iowa, transfers to Purdue, converts to running back, and just is still clearly just figuring out the position. He's a wide receiver playing running back. But what he was able to do last year in terms of some key elusiveness numbers was really impressive too. So I'd be watching him, because if he can continue growing in just like the most basic aspects of playing the position, he could be really freaking good and come out of nowhere and be like that kind of weird looking profile, like, you know, Antonio Gibson was when he came out, and be that.
Can we get you to say that Tyrone Tracy is Antonio Gibson plus? Can we get the plus on that?
Tyrone Tracy could very well be Antonio Gibson plus. Is that better? Is that good for the cut up? Yeah, perfect.
We can edit the could be out of it, and then it'll.
Yeah. Just okay. Yeah, I'll try one more time. Tyrone Tracy is the next Antonio Gibson plus.
Okay, we won't have to do anything in post production.
Yeah, no editing, nothing. I fixed it for you there. Yeah, right away.
So we are going to have Travis back for our Wednesday edition of the podcast. We're going to talk about wide receivers and tight ends, but as we get ready to close out this episode, I mentioned at the start A to Z Sports, and you mentioned some of the behind the scenes stuff. But what is there anything you want to let the listeners know to check out?
Really just going to be doing a whole lot of NFL draft coverage from here on out. I'm working on updating a few of my key metrics that even I was building at RotoViz. And so I'll be doing some more data-driven pieces and then offering that up to all of our other team members who covered the entire NFL at a team beat level with some kind of analytics-based analysis. Really want to lean into that aspect of things given my background. So just be looking for just kind of the best coverage, in my opinion, nationally for NFL, as well as we build out the college football side of the team this fall. A to Z Sports is going to be the place for both college football and NFL. So just really proud of the team and what they've already accomplished and what they're building towards during this NFL draft. So A to Z Sports and the College to Kent podcast with our buddy Stefan. That's what I'm doing these days. And
the best place, obviously, to find out what is going on with Travis as well is on Twitter. It's at @FF_TravisM. So give him a follow over there. But that is going to do it for this edition of RotoViz Overtime. We will be back with another one. Make sure you're subscribed to the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed. You'll get that once it is available. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. My co-host is Shawn Siegele. Check out Shawn's work up on rotoviz.com. And until we're back, have a good one.